Are we set to go, Margaret? I lost you for a second there.
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to get us started. And the first half of this, and Eric is going to talk about the second half. So we kind of have this, the way it flows in two separate parts, if you will, of this, but to wrap in the whole presentation. So I'm Kelley Senkowski, and I work in e-learning at Grand Valley State University. And we are going to get started just talking through a little bit of our overview agenda. We're going to talk through the 4 types of participation interaction that might be new to some of you who have talked about 3 types. We're going to talk about opportunities for participation in your online course. So best practices, everything is going to be HLC aligned that we talked through, and come up with some ideas for you as well as far as how to implement this in your online courses for quality. And then we're going to talk about how to implement this at the institution level, from the course level to the institution level. So the piece I'm talking through, we are talking through today, is the participation interaction piece. So if you're an instructional designer, these steps, the 5 key steps to course design are familiar. If you are a faculty who was handed a course that needs to create their own, there's kind of steps in your course. So we're talking about the participation interaction piece today. This is where you'll see the social presence piece. So a lot of what I'm going to talk through is the social presence, building that with your students. So that's also kind of another buzzword that's out there. It's all tied together in what I'll talk through. So why? Why do we even want to talk about this? Why do we want to incorporate this into our courses? The things we're going to talk about today can be incorporated whether you're face-to-face, hybrid, fully online, but I'm going to really base a lot of it in the fully online environment because that's a lot what I deal with. But I also believe you can take the bases we're going to talk about for online learning into the face-to-face, vice versa. So a lot of it's going to be geared towards online learning so that if you have pieces of your course or all of your course online, it'll work too. So the reason is, or excuse me, the question here is why? Why do we want to build presence? Why do we want to have the components that we're going to talk through in our online courses? The big piece is that humanizes your course, right? It builds your presence. You are a fundamental piece of your course. You're the faculty member, the facilitator, the instructor. Your experience matters. Your stories matter. These are everything we're going to talk through are HLC aligned. So that is helpful when you're going through accreditation as well, as far as your online course quality. But it also increases the likelihood that your students will come to you with questions. You want to have that interaction piece as well. You want them to succeed. You want them to be engaged in your course with each other, with you. What I've seen in the past is if they don't have a social presence, a student in the course has a question, they may go to their program advisor. They might go to the program director if they have a relationship from a previous course with them. You really want them to come to you if they have any questions or confusion or issues in the course. So it really builds that rapport with them as well. It also makes them feel like they're in a classroom with each other when we talk through some of these things. So all of that is going to increase your students' success because they're more engaged. It also adds context. So you're able to guide them with your instructions or videos or whatever it is you're doing. It adds a context to their learning. It's not just read page whatever, take a test. There's a context to it that you are adding into your course. But I guess for real engagement, I want to really emphasize for you to share your experiences, whether you've read journals, gone to conferences, real life experiences, put yourself in there because that is very valuable to your students. So I share an example quite often. So if you're in an online course, I call this the empty room example. Let's say you're in an online course and someone says, here you go, here's your login. We're getting, class starts tomorrow. You log into your course and the first week is, here's your readings, do your readings, here's a quiz, and then come back and do this again. So if you're walking into a face-to-face course, say you're in person, you walk into this big course room or conference room, you walk in and there's things lined up. Here's your reading articles, here's your test, here's a quiz you need to take, do all these things for the next 2 hours and then leave. Come back again next week, here's your readings. I mean, how many of you would return week after week and sit in that classroom for 2 hours and just do all the content? Probably not many. I don't think that I would want to do that. So you really want to have that presence, that peace, to let the students feel like they walk into a classroom. There's people there, there's an instructor there, there's rapport, there's experiences shared. So really, I kind of tell people, put your hat on for what your course would look like in person, even though it's online. So it's just a different way of looking at your course. And again, that's that social presence that we talked through. So the 4 types of participation and interaction that we're going to talk about for this step in your course design and course build is the faculty to student. Again, this is the intentional social presence. It doesn't happen by accident. It's intentional. It's built in. It's practiced. It's applied. The next one is a student to student. Then we're going to talk about the student to community. That's the one that most people haven't talked about much with the interaction and participation with their courses, especially for online. Again, that can be applied for hybrid or face-to-face as well. And the 4th one is a student to content. I am not going to cover that one in this presentation because that's implied. If they're doing all the other 3, they're in the content. And if they're in the content, hopefully they're doing the other 3. So we're going to talk about those first 3 off the top. So first of all, we have our faculty to student interaction. I have read numerous student surveys at this institution and in previous institutions. And a lot of the students will say their big disappointment, if you will, in their online courses is response time. They will send emails and students don't even get a response, or if they do, it's a couple weeks later. And it was perhaps about a question in that week's content. So really the response, the timeliness, and please respond, those are really, they're very critical, I would have to say, for these students. They want to feel like you're there because they can't walk up to the front of the class and ask you a question. They can't stay after class and ask you a question. You know, they can't raise their hand. So these are very important to be able to be responsive. But there's other different things for recommendations for your presence too, like your weekly announcements, checking in with them, and whether it's by email or if it's a phone call, but in general, you can do a non-participation check-in. So so many of us have had students on online courses where they show up, they're participating, they're doing great, and all of a sudden they disappear. Like, where did they go? They're doing fabulous, and it might not even be they might have high enough grade that it's not a question of passing, but where'd they go? Something happened. So checking in with them before too much time has passed, just to show you care. Sometimes they just need someone to say, hey, is everything okay? How are you doing? Before they'll even think to ask for maybe an extension or this happened or something that's going on. So it's really that communication piece to let them feel like you're present, you're there, you've noticed they're not there, and you're trying to help, you want to ask. But also things like relevant tips, conferences, resources, things you can share, that's your presence again. So whether it's in discussion posts or whether it's a forum that you have in your discussion board, you might have a separate forum that says professional tips or something of the such, where you can share. If they go to conference, they can share they've gone to one or they're signing up for one. It's just really keeping the interaction, but it's also helping them build their resources, but also the way they look at their future career. They're meeting people that are in the real world working where they want to work if they're attending these things. So it's a lot of different journals or things like that you can share that may be above and beyond the different resources they're going to get in their content. So feedback on every assignment. I say this because I've also read survey responses from students that have shared, we got an A in the course. Me and my partner, we worked really hard on this, and we got an A on our final project. We worked, lots of hours, and we don't know what we did right. Like, they're used to getting feedback if they did something wrong they need to improve upon, but they want to hear what have they done right. They don't know why this is a good or an A, or why it's a good report or paper or project. They really want to hear from you, like, wow, that was really great how you thought of it that way, or what a great scenario, or whatever, and here's why in our field, or I've seen that somewhere else in the field. Here's a journal entry where somebody has done something like that. So they really want to hear from you, even if they get the A. But for sure on every assignment, so that they have the opportunity to change something that they're doing on future assignments or papers or things like that. Because, your rubric looks simple to you because you created it. But if someone else takes your course, another instructor, and also uses the same rubric, they still could grade totally differently with the same rubric. So it really helps the students learn what you're looking for and expecting if they get feedback based on the rubric and the assignment. The other thing is online synchronous chats. So this is the piece where you're interacting with them. This will come up again with student-to-student interaction, but this is the part where you are available. So whether you have regular office hours, or maybe for your online course, you have 2 or 3 planned throughout the semester where you can just answer questions or talk about assignments. This is very helpful. Now, this is different from lessons, right? Like this isn't talking about lessons and teaching online if you're doing an online course, because you'll already have videos and things for that. This will just be getting everyone together. Maybe you're going to talk about, like in my graduate classes I teach, I talk about week 2, I have everybody get together. Hopefully they've been through all the content week 1. They've already submitted some assignment, whether it's introduction, board, or something, but it's really getting them all together in an online course so that I can make sure they know where to find everything. They're on track with expectations of mine as their instructor. So I don't want anyone getting lost. So I have those. We talk through like assignments we're going to do or final projects we're going to have. Then I have one around week 11 or 12 when they should really be wrapping up or diving into their final project that they've been working on, or paper, or research paper. It really kind of gets them thinking about it if they haven't started, but really just kind of, they need to discuss it, have something to bring to the table for that. So, but it also helps them learn from each other again, right? Like we'll get into that one next slide, but it's you participating in all discussion forums too. So if you have a question and answer forum, which is helpful, then you can answer them right there for everybody. But also if you have weekly discussions on how to apply the learning, how do you apply learning from that week's content? It's you participating. And I don't mean answering everybody's, you don't want to do that because you want it to be like a class discussion where people are interacting, but you being in there a couple times a week is very important. So it's not just left as a student assignment, but you being part of it like you would in an in-person class. Again, posting different thoughts on someone's answer. Maybe they didn't think of it, a different way that would be helpful in their field or profession, or sharing a different journal article or something like that with them based on whatever they've responded to. So it's really being present in your discussion boards as well. Weekly announcements I mentioned in the emails because you can send those out, right, in an email every week. But the other one would be your video announcement. So whatever it is, hey, everybody, even in 1 minute, hey, everybody, last week's assignment, I saw this. This was really great. Maybe I need to discuss this a little further because I saw several people miss that. Don't forget to be planning ahead. In 2 weeks, we've got a rough draft due for your research paper, whatever, whatever it is that you have coming up. So your face saying kind of the things that you would say in the classroom if you're in person, which kind of rolls into then our overview video introduction. So when you have course modules lined out, whatever LMS you're working in, every week there's usually, you'll have your overview and hopefully you have all the context and this is what we're going to learn this week and this is how you apply to it. But the video introduction is very helpful because it's your voice saying exactly what you would say in person when you walk in for that class session. The first day of the week. It's, hey, this is what we're covering this week. Pay attention to this item because you're going to need it for the assignment at the end of the module. Really spend some time on that, whatever it is for your weekly module. But it's just, even if it's a 1 minute or 2 minutes, maybe it's a little longer for your module video, but 1 to 5 minutes. But you can also use both of those. Like you can use your video you have for your overview and use that as your weekly announcement as well. But the weekly announcement video is really nice on a moment in time video. In other words, how are they doing? What did you see last week? What did you like in their discussion post? Was there something funny? Was there something really interesting? What would you like to build upon? It's those kinds of things that you would just say face to face. So this one is just you. This whole slide was just talking about you being present in your course. So they are seeing your face. This is that social presence piece. So this is the piece that is directly with you, but the next ones are going to be how you design your course and how you are running it. So the next one is your student-to-student interaction. This is how do you build this into your course? course? How do you design it for that? So now this is the part where the participation and engagement piece comes in student to student. Now, again, you're still present in these things, but we're specifically looking at that student to student interaction so that you're thinking consciously of designing that into your building. So the first one is peer review assignments. So this also comes into play when you want to offer more than one chance for mastery. In other words, if you're trying to help them master a course or a paper or a concept or a topic, you want them to perhaps have more than one shot at it, right? So they're learning from whatever they've missed, they learn again. So perhaps they do a peer review for their final project with your rubric or with their research paper with your rubric before they even give you the draft to feedback on and the final paper. So it's building these things in where they're interacting with each other or group reviews or things like that. You'll find that peer reviews and group reviews are sometimes a lot pickier than you would even be. So that can actually really help the student with their assignment as well. Online synchronous chats, and we talked about that already, but this is the angle of get the students talking with each other in those. So it's not just asking you questions, but maybe it's, hey, sharing something, share your topic that you want to talk about in your final project, or what are you thinking about your topic's going to be, or get them talking about each other, ask somebody a question about something, and that, or reflect on something. It's really getting them talking to each other. So you could even bring up the discussion posts for the week. Hey, so-and-so, you had a really good response to, so-and-so's response, or their question or whatever it was. What was that? Could you please share? So it's really kind of getting them talking to each other in a live synchronous chat interaction, trying to get them to do that. So group posts are good too. So if you've got a large class, you might want to divide these up into 4 people in a group or 3 or whatever it is you want, so that they're actually working in groups, even in an online environment, absolutely in an online environment. So there's a lot of things they can do for group posts or group projects or group activities or partner work. You can have them interview people, or each other, interview a classmate on something. Maybe they introduced their classmate because they interviewed them in a chat. Something that gets them connecting with each other so they're feeling like this is a classroom. You don't want them to feel like your online course or hybrid course even is a independent study. You want them to feel like, it's a classroom where they can talk and they get to know their peers. Video discussion responses are great because you can have them respond to each other. You can require that in one of the weeks or a couple times throughout the semester, because they can just hit the button and video it and answer. So they can actually respond to each other that way. They can do it on their phone. They can post it from YouTube. There's a myriad of ways they can post this in the discussion post as well. So it's really nice if they can hear each other speak. That comes into play really well. I don't think I mentioned that in the instructor piece, but also for you to get feedback by video. Just intonations are different when people are saying a video. Even meaning is construed a little differently if you have tone and mannerisms versus if it's just written context. So that's really helpful for them to interact and get to know each other. Another one is role playing. Scenarios is another one. I think I heard that mentioned in one of the breakouts earlier. Is scenarios and discussion boards and things like that are very helpful for them. It helps them to apply the learning in a different way. It's not just answering multiple choice quiz after they read something, but it's how do you apply these things? How do you get them talking to each other? They can even do scenario discussion board posts in groups. So how would you discuss it as a group, and then come back in our big class discussion, tell us what your group decided was the proper response in the scenario, some kind of a field application. Well, how would they use this in their career, or how did that relate to the topic? But role playing is good too, because you can swap their roles the next week, which as a student, I couldn't stand that because you get so invested in the first week. And then if they swap it on you the next week, it's so hard to switch your thinking because you already convinced yourself. So those are actually really great. But again, it's getting them interacting, responding, and talking to one another. The last piece of participation interaction is the student to community. This is one that most people have not thought through or even worried about building in. But a lot of these, a lot of these suggestions that I'm talking through might validate something you're already doing. You might do some of these already, but not understood it was actually a piece that should be in your course, a quality piece. But it's also maybe giving you ideas or reminding you if you use some of these techniques in a past course, but it kind of got away from you to bring it back. So yeah, the student to community piece would be things like students learning outside of the content of your course. So in other words, have them interview somebody in the profession, somebody in their field, future job role they would like to have. Have them bring that back. They could post that in the discussion post in a 5-minute video and talk about it. Have them even do job searches outside. Like week 2, I like them to do a job search where they'll actually use something in this course in a future job because it creates that relevancy. Like, oh, it's not just a check mark so I can get my degree. I actually should pay attention because I'm going to need this at some point in the future. So anything that can build relevancy like that. So you can have guest speakers come in too as well. But anything that increases their, it's the authentic learning as well. So relevant, authentic learning. Anything that increases their engagement, but the relevancy to their life. It just really, it makes them pay attention a little bit more. They want to participate and they definitely will interact more. You'll have a lot more quality discussions, I should say, or questions, which is fabulous. So anything you can bring from the outside community. I've even had them go out, take pictures, interview people, do whatever, and bring it back in the course and explain how that relates. Anything that's they can see. It's not just this book you're talking about in your course and moving on. It matters. What you're teaching matters. So just basically designed to increase engagement. To build engagement, we've talked about scenarios, game-based learning. We have great digital studios people here. Actually, they were talking in the previous breakout. And at our university, and a lot of universities have these where you can get 360 images and you can do escape rooms, you can do work environments, whether it's a hospital room or a retail store or whatever. You can create things like that. So any kind of game-based learning, choices of assignments. Maybe somebody wants to make a video, somebody wants to do a project, somebody wants to write a research paper. You know, whatever it is that they're good at or they're interested in helps them to be more engaged. As long as you're using the same rubric as far as content mastery. Also makes it a little more fun for you to grade, and it's a little different too. Here's one too that you can join students in online group meetings, I'm trying to say. This is a good one where, okay, so let's just say in a face-to-face course, you've got different tables of different groups or sectioned around your room because you're having group meeting time for half an hour or whatever. This is something where you can just pop in, hey, do I need to clarify anything? Do you have questions? Are you on the right track? So for online, what I've had some faculty do is have the students post or email to you or do a Google, sheet or something on it that their group decides what days or times they're going to meet every week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And then they have a link that they use all the time. So you can tell them, I'm going to join one of your, group meetings. I'm going to join your Zoom at some point. I can answer questions, redirect. But guess what? Their engagement's going to go way up. You're not going to get so many of the students that decide not to show up because they know you could show up at any point. But you can also be there to redirect and help them along if they're doing a project or something with a team. And it's not difficult to do, but it's your presence again. We kind of talked through some of these too, guest speakers, interview the field participant. You can have them find a job post. We've done that. Here's one, social media. You can have them do a social media search for either companies that they would like to work for or something in their field. But what I've had them do is look for support groups. Like I teach ed tech, so I have them look for some support social media groups that are in their profession, something that could actually be a resource to them in the future. So many times people think of social media as just an entertainment piece, but it's not. There's a lot of good resources out there. So whatever social media they like, they can find support in their field. I already talked about take something out in the real world, bring it back to discussion board, take a picture, post the context, those kinds of things. So anything to design game-based interaction, something outside of the box that they have for their online learning is all going to be helpful for them. And all these things I suggested are HLC aligned. So now we are going to move on to part 2, but did anyone have any questions on this part before we get into a supportive topic with this. It kind of flows into that. I know I talk fast. We have a lot to cover. I apologize. If not, we can keep going, Eric, and you can take it over.
Sure. So thank you again for attending our session. I think with sessions like this, also, hopefully as attendees of events like this, like the reason you're here in this session probably is because you care about your practice, you care about the things that you're doing, you care about the students and success that they have in your courses. So I think it's also important to note, though, that Kelley shared a plethora of possibilities there. And so I think sometimes, I don't know about you, but I feel very overwhelmed sometimes, with following the social media feeds and a new resource comes out from whatever organization, Online Learning Consortium, EDUCAUSE, Instructional Technology Council, the Michigan Colleges Online Organization, the ETOM group itself. There's all sorts of sort of information overload. And so I think what's important in this whole area is to just sort of put things in sort of a little bit of a systematic way or a framework, and put things in buckets. And you don't have to do everything all at once. So taking a look at your course as a whole and trying a few things as time goes on, and just being aware of quality principles is helpful. So before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to talk through really briefly, if you do not have I would imagine most colleges do, most universities have some quality benchmarks and a process, but if you do not, I'm going to talk through just briefly how GVSU approached this idea of a peer review rubric, or approached the notion of quality in online courses, because I don't know if your institution has been really proactive or not in this area of distance education, but a lot of institutions, sort of this idea of online and hybrid courses, or telecourses back in the day, or interactive television, or those sorts of distance delivery models, somewhat has grown in many ways organically at your institution. So, and then, of course, a year and a half ago, we were all thrown into this online remote teaching environment. So at Grand Valley, I think it's also helpful to know just sort of how we have organized our university around online learning, hybrid learning, distance education, if you will. So it's sort of centralized and decentralized at the same time, if that makes any sense. Some universities at some point throughout the time, as distance education has grown, sometimes they split apart and created a separate institution within the institution to create online courses, to do programming, to build curriculum, and those sorts of things. Grand Valley was not like that. So it kind of, distance education, online learning, hybrid learning grew organically, and it sort of became an initiative out of the Office of the Provost. There was the Faculty Teaching and Learning Center that was involved. University Libraries was involved, and then the eLearning team, which is I used to be the director of. So it was sort of a group administratively that would get together pretty regularly to talk about strategy, to talk about what's next. And so that group still exists, and they still have regular meetings, but there's also a faculty governance piece. So a lot of institutions have a faculty union. GVSU does not, but we do have a faculty governance process. And so there's this council, the Online Education and Micro-Credential Council, that was established to sort of track and to be the voice of faculty out of the Academic Senate. So that's where we began. And Kelley, if you want to go to the next slide. Also, what was sort of a initiative was just following, as Kelley mentioned, the notion of HLC accreditation, making sure that we're doing things as a systematic way institutionally, so that accreditation, was part of what we were doing. We used the CRAC guidelines here, and I pulled out a couple of them that just resonated and really pinpointed, I think, where we were headed with developing this institutional rubric. And that was, that we wanted to make sure that we had quality standards, that there was some level of oversight, realizing faculty in and of themselves will definitely, take each iteration of their course each semester and improve. It was more about, what is that oversight administratively that we can provide. And then also the second piece was just making sure that there was a consistent process for developing, delivering, and evaluating our courses. So, as faculty, as instructional designers, as distance learning administrators at your institutions, there's a lot of pieces to delivering online learning, and there's the course development part with support perhaps from instructional designers, digital media developers, but then there's also that facilitation part where you actually do the teaching, and faculty are delivering the course and facilitating it. And then there's the evaluation piece. So how do we know what it is that we're doing is working? And so we've looked at these guidelines specifically, but there's a wide array of other standards and benchmarks there. This one specifically was tied to HLC accreditation, but we also had at our university some as part of our strategic initiatives, as part of our university strategic plans to advance the institution forward with online delivery. And so how do we do that and still maintain teaching excellence, quality, and those sorts of things was also woven in there. I just didn't, put that on the slide here. Kelley, go ahead and jump to the next slide. So here's sort of our timeline, just briefly. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this timeline slide, but everything sort of kicked off in 2015 with a specific charge by the Academic Senate to create a peer review instrument. And that began with a lot of conversations among the OEMC faculty that were on that committee, with just a big literature review, like what's happening in higher ed on this topic, what are some resources that we can gather up, and that culminated into a specific instrument pilot. So we looked at a variety of specific rubrics that were already out there. Quality Matters, for example. We also looked at the Penn State peer review guide, and then also even GRCCs, our local institution here, their class observation form. So, kind of looking at globally what's happening across the nation and all the way down to like even what's happening at our peer institutions. And those instruments were reviewed by a series of faculty. And as part of that work, there was a whole collection of survey feedback. Questions were asked around, how long did it take you to run through this rubric? Was it successful? Do you think it made move the needle in the areas that you wanted to improve? So after that review, the OEMC kind of came back as a group, built GVSU's own peer review rubric, which is sort of an amalgam of a lot of different resources. And I have them listed there. So QM and even the Blackboard Exemplary Course Award rubric was involved there. And the focus was really around leveraging the 7 principles of good practice in undergraduate education, which is the format that Penn State used in their peer review rubric. And so using those as kind of headings, if you will, for the rubric was viewed as very valuable. So that was created. There was a draft. There were select faculty that piloted it. This draft instrument was also deployed out of the OEMC across the university with specific faculty and deans and unit heads. Also was part of the online and hybrid faculty learning communities that were going on around, hey, we need some folks to try this instrument out. That then resulted in a few more iterations of that rubric. Finally, it was approved by the University Academic Senate in 2017 and then deployed. And so that deployment, we'll talk a little bit more as the presentation goes here, but if you want to jump to the next slide, Kelley. Some of the lessons learned as part of our work in developing this rubric, one was just the importance of a collaborative effort, so having a a holistic approach whereby we engaged the community. So it wasn't just a group of administrators and key maybe faculty or staff got in a room and created this rubric blindly. It was actually a collaborative effort, which was huge. We also invoked, the shared faculty and governance process, which was key, so that there was buy-in along the way among the faculty. Not only just buy-in, but that there was actually feedback from faculty in the use of the tool as we were continuing to iterate. And that in and of itself sharpened the value of the rubric also. One of the takeaways was also making sure that this common framework existed. So across all of our courses, whatever discipline, whatever the school or college, the course department, the course was run out of, there was this uniform framework. So we were all speaking the same language. We were using the same sort of nomenclature and key headings around the 7 principles of best practice and good practice in undergraduate education. And it also kind of prompted a lot of communication among the faculty that were seeing this rubric for the first time to even think themselves of improving incrementally their courses, but also engaged with folks like Kelley and the other resources that were part of the institution, all the other instructional designers, the digital media developers, resources from university libraries, resources from our faculty teaching and learning center. So it really did, I think, kick things up a notch around having the conversation be accelerated around what is quality, how do we measure it, what are some steps that I can use as a faculty member to continue to improve and enhance my course semester after semester. So that's kind of how we built out the rubric and some lessons learned there. Go ahead, Kelley, with the next slide. And this I kind of want to turn back over to you, if it's okay, to talk through about sort of the rubber meets the road as far as how the rubric has been successfully deployed and actually consistently implemented in a variety of initiatives at GBSU.
Yeah, thank you. And we are continuing to try to grow the use of this at the university, but it has been in use already at our faculty learning center, teaching learning center. They use that in their professional development. And we also have it in our leads courses, which is one of our programs that is fully online in compact course timeframes. And so this is used in that. It's also used in our foundations course that we we require of anybody who is going to teach online in our university. So we are implementing it in a variety of ways. We also have a liaison model that we use in our eLearning department that we work with specific different areas, program areas. So we're also available to use that on any of our faculty courses if they come to us and just want some recommendations or feedback on their online course as well. So we are continuing to try to spread the use of that. It is an inherent part of our training that we're doing in the leads in the Faculty Learning Center and our foundations course, but we're also trying to expand its use as well. So the next slide. This is just an example of our rubric, if you will, our checklist. And the circles just simply represent all of the different things that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. All these factor into all the different rubric items that we have as well, so that it aligns with it. But I appreciate what Eric said, absolutely. So with all the things that I talked about, pick one. There's so many different things I talked through of ways that you can implement, but both or I should say in all of the different ways, the participation ways with the instructor to student, the student to student, and the community to student. So really pick one in each of those areas that you want to improve upon. Absolutely, you cannot do it all in one time frame, and nor is it applicable in every class to use all those ideas, but pick one that works for you as well. So I appreciate Eric saying that, because yeah, that is definitely the intent, to just pick something that you want to try and improve upon to continually increase value in your courses, but obviously not gonna do all those at once. So we would love to take questions, and would really love, you're welcome to unmute or type. We would love to hear what's one thing that you heard today, one strategy, one activity, one thought that you would like to add to your course or institution. That would be a great reflection for us. So I will open that up.
I'll start. Have you noticed a difference significantly in your success rates once you started implementing this?
Eric, I don't know if you have seen that data or not. I have not seen it being tracked yet, but that's something that there's conversations that I've been a part of that we would like to do that. But Eric, do you know of anything that we've tracked it with?
Yeah, Margaret, that's an excellent point and great question. And kind of hits the nail on the head, right? As far as why is it that we're even doing this? And actually using the quality instrument itself to track quality to actually make it, move the needle in this area. We did do some initial student success rate in research. I do not believe, getting at your point though, that there was the matching of the rubric itself, the peer review rubric itself, and there really wasn't a pre and post sort of thing. So there was a lot of work done initially by the OEMC around student retention and dropout rates, those sorts of things. And then the rubric came about, and then it was put in place and used. But there hasn't really been that full cycle yet on the piece, to be honest and to be truthful, where we can, I guess, administratively show the difference there. I think also what's part of the big picture there is, you throw COVID in there and throw some other things in there.
I was going to say that.
And I apologize, Eric, because as soon as I asked that question, then I went, well, that was a dumb question because COVID came. Because on my stats, I haven't been doing them because COVID came. So
no,
I do apologize, but
it's not a dumb question.
I'm hoping that you will see that once we get back to some type of normal.
And I think also, there's been there was a lot of work initially too, because one of the things that we have done in the past 2 years we've rolled out some really dedicated online programs. There is an accelerated degree program called LEADS that we put together. And this instrument was used as a resource in both the course development process and in the valuation process. And so, but all that stuff was deployed just before COVID. And so I think, the university has been fast forward and doing a lot of those other activities. And so there hasn't been time to reflect. But your point is a very important one and very well taken, that we should be measuring the things that we're doing around quality, not only just developing the instruments and have them, kind of deployed, but also then the follow-up of how are these working, continuously enhancing that rubric as well. So fair point, great point, and something to be inspired as far as next steps is. How about that?
That's an excellent question, because I've been involved in a lot of different, even in a previous university, trying to figure out how do we measure that. It's so difficult in an online course. I haven't seen the answer to that question because there's so many variables when you have online students, right? Like, are they caregivers? There's so many. Did they get sick? Did they not? There's so many variables that's been difficult. So I think it's more been leaned on. We want to be HLC aligned and for accreditation and feel like our universities having quality online courses more than it's so hard to track things like DFW rates or, there's so many variables. So I don't know that answer to that question. That's when I've picked
they're never going to be accurate either because of the multiple variables. So, but you want to be able to prove that, all this effort that you put into it has paid off. And that's where we all want to end up. So
I will say, just sort of ad hoc, the research that was done really pointed to some good success, especially around our graduate level courses. In many ways, they had success rates that were higher than the traditional course delivery models. However, on the undergrad side, there were some opportunities to improve, let's say, and that kind of really culminated in more aggressive approaches for student orientation. So a lot of our time, energy, and effort also was building out a student orientation module so that students are more well prepared. So it's sort of like all these pieces that are kind of going in the same direction, and maybe opening up to others who have done work in this area. I'm sure that, we've got 40 plus participants here. Has anyone done research among our attendees here, and could they answer that question? Or are there other questions that folks have? That's fine too. Just jump in.
Okay, not to hog the limelight, but this is for all of your classes, not just online, but your on-campus classes too, this rubric that you've developed, correct?
This one was actually, I think, and Eric, you can probably answer this better because I wasn't at the beginning of this creation of this rubric, but this checklist was for online courses, is my understanding.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, there was, as probably with many institutions, there's, a large just variety of ways that departments tend to do the work of peer review. So I mentioned earlier, we are centralized and decentralized. So depending on the department, each department or college or unit had their own way of sort of managing peer review, managing quality, both traditional and online hybrid. And so this one really was a charge out of our academic senate to provide some consistency, specifically for online courses. So it was really dedicated on the online and hybrid delivery formats, much more so than a standard across the board evaluation tool. And thank you, Heather, for putting a link to your rainbow rubric at Montcalm.
Does anyone have any other questions, or could you tell me what you'd like to try to implement or strategy you'd like to try at in your course or at university? Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Gina.
Has anyone taken advantage of any of the other rubrics that are out there, whether it's the OLC scorecard, QM, SUNY's Oscar evaluation tool, and Michigan Colleges Online has their own, or does each institution tend to use their own homegrown option? I'm just curious as to what sort of is popular out there. I mean, QM is sort of the standard, the default standard, but there's a lot of other really, really great rubrics, including even Blackboard Exemplary Course Award rubric. Here's another mashup. Thanks, Gloria.
Excellent, Sharon, on the video. Even one a week would be awesome, so they could see your face, hear your voice. Anyone else want to share their rubric, what it's based off of? If there's any other ones out there. Love to hear that, or any of the ideas you heard today that you want to try, or that was new to you, or some reflection. And I think our presentation was posted in the discussion board already. Thank you, Caitlin. Excellent. I love to see the different examples. That's helpful. Any other questions or any conversation around this that you want to put out there and ask, if it's something you're considering at university?
I'm not seeing any, but I think our time is up anyway. We were supposed to go to 12:20, and I do thank both you, Kelley and Eric. Wonderful material, and I know a lot of us have not done this at our institution, so we're always looking for. And thank you everyone else who has shared their documents with us, because this is just sharing ideas always helps. And once this COVID is over, I will be coming back for stats. So
right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate your time on this today.
Yes, please reach out if you have questions too, or would like to continue the conversation through email or other means. We're here. And Caitlin, also thanks for sharing your rubric there, linked to QM standards. That's great. Thank you all.
thank you guys.